This is the start of our benchmarking of 950 GTX Xtreme from Gigabyte. We're using our standard gaming PC as a benchmark. The first benchmark we have here is user benchmark, which is basically a site where you can test your own computer and see what you're getting compared to other users with similar setups. It basically gives us a battle cruiser rating for desktop, a speedboat for gaming, and a workstation, which is not very relevant for here. Overall, what it says is the CPU score is very good, the memory is very good, the graphics is a bit below average, but the average they're using here is 980, which is, well, you wouldn't expect a 950 to get to a 980 score. What it's saying, for people with the i5 6600, we scored in the 62nd percentile. That means the setup that we have here with the RAM and the motherboard actually makes the CPU perform above average, which is what we aim for. The graphics card, however, is below expectations, and the reason for that is quite simple. We've stuck to Gigabyte's standard overclocking options here, whereas this is a user benchmark, so you'd get a lot of people overclocking these cards quite a bit, which you can do if you have one of them, but for benchmark purposes we keep it at the stock overclocking that Gigabyte does. The hard drive in our test bench performs very well. It says we're performing in the 89th percentile for this hard drive. So again, it's just an indication that it's a very good match, this hard drive, to this setup. This is not using the SSD part. We got 154 megabytes per second, which is quite impressive. And then what we're using in here is the option with the two 8 gig DIMMs, which again says for 16 gig DDR4 clocked at that speed, we're actually in the 92nd percentile, meaning we're doing a lot better with the setup than what is the average. Again, this is due to we really try and do our homework here at Easy Gamer and try to match components that really would work well together. Let's move on to the next test. Here's what we got in Firestrike. We just ran the standard Firestrike at P1080. We got a score of 3,812. You can have a look here at the individual graphics and physics scores and the combined score. This is fairly respectable. It's sort of what we'd expect from a 950. What's very nice, if you have a look here at the temperatures, is the CPU stayed around 40 and the graphics card never really got over about 55, which is quite a nice thing. It means these synthetic benchmarks are designed to push the PC. It means the cooling is very well sorted out. We don't have any issues on that. If we look at the compared results, as expected with a graphics card of this level, we're fairly low on the charts here, but that's the point of this, is to get a card that can actually play some games at P1080, and it's not meant to be a hardcore gaming PC where you'd set everything to ultra. Here we have Dota.
Into the breach.
We have everything set to maximum, and we're running sort of mid 80 frames per second. It occasionally dips down into the 70s, but it seems to be running very smoothly. Have a look at the settings.
30 seconds to battle.
At P1080, and it's set to best looking. Here we have Counter-Strike Go. It's running at P1080 with everything set to max. As you can see, we're running very high frame rates, 70 to 80 frames per second here again. So no problems with that.
Secure that weapon.
Seems to be receiving.
The bomb is down. 2 guys left.
Here we have Civilizations 5. Just to give you,
This is a
an
good
idea, we
place
just
to found a
started
city.
a quick game.
Food and
running
resources are plentiful here.
about 120, 140 frames per second. Now, with something like Civilizations, it's not a bad idea to have a bit higher frames than you need, but 60 is probably fine, because for a strategy game that isn't a fast-paced one, especially something like this, which is a turn-based thing, it's not a problem if you run a little bit lower. As long as you stay over about 30 frames per second, normally doesn't bother you. The settings we're using here to get this, it's running nice and smoothly. I'll quickly show you. We've set it to use its defaults. Its defaults that it went to for the system was 2 anti-aliasing, medium, few settings high, few settings medium. The reality is we can probably crank that up a bit, but the look of the game already looks quite nice. So it is running Civilizations 5 on this, definitely not an issue at all. Here we have Call of Duty 5. Bit of an older one, but still a classic. We've set everything to maximum except anti-aliasing has been turned off, and it seems to be running very nicely at 90 frames per second, which is perfect because that means we can get quite a bit going here before we even have the slightest issues in terms of performance going down. Yep, it seems to be running perfectly. Here we have Skyrim, with everything set to absolutely maximum at B108, and unfortunately on Skyrim you can't seem to turn off vertical sync, so you always have it limited to 60 frames per second, but as you can see here when we have the smoke effects here, it drops down to about 55, which is okay, but we're here at a scene where we have very far draw distances and we can really see what's going on. Visuals look great, as Skyrim does, and it seems to be running perfectly. Everything's set to maximum. Here we have Borderlands the pre-sequel with everything set to high at B108. You see we're sort of right at the sort of edge of where you would want to be.
Warning, no atmosphere detected.
Around 60 frames per second. I see we drop down a little bit there. Let's see what happens if we get into the
pulling your string.
Settings, everything maximum. So if you prefer a little bit higher frame rates, one or two of the settings down to medium. Basically setting everything roughly to medium quality here. If we want to do a test, we can set it to high, apply video settings. Now at high, we're actually still running 60 which is quite impressive. Quite a good snapshot. Actually expected it to do a lot less. But it seems to be has got a kill your computer, or at least kill your graphics card mode called Ultra, which we'll demonstrate here now. Here we have Fractured Space. This is a newer title which is seriously graphics intensive, and as you can see, we're not running it at the highest resolution here. This is a game with which actually has quite insane graphics, but here we have it P1080 with basically everything set to low, and we're getting nice playable frames, but we are just over 60. So this is when you get to this kind of game is where you would really want to get a higher card if you want to get quick frames at high settings. Just for a test, just want to see what happens if we set everything to ultra in here. I have a feeling we're going to get silly slow frames per second on this one. Right. As you can see, the visuals look quite amazing on this one with everything set to ultra. And we're actually getting not unplayable frames. Unfortunately, this is not one of the friendly games. They take away Steam's frames per second indicator on here, but it is playable. I'd say it's actually surprisingly smooth for a card like this, where it might get a little bit more interesting as if we have more ships in the area, but overall very impressed with this actually. Yeah, it seems to be running smooth enough. Not sure exactly what the frames per second is here, but it doesn't seem to be getting jittery, and we're running everything on ultra. And at the time of making this was one of the newest games available on the market. Xtreme Gaming's time spy score, as expected, with a lower end card, it won't be that great. We got a 1616 score, which compared to if you compare that to the 970, which is a good benchmark, the 970 got 3738. So we're quite a bit behind that. We've got about 3 times as much as what they consider a gaming laptop, which this being a graphics card which is quite a decent one for P1080 gaming, makes sense. But we're only better than 5% of the results. If you take that into, if you want to take the 970 back into the equation, the 970 was better than 32% of the results. So we're quite a bit behind something like the 970, but we are at a much cheaper price point. But if you are considering this card, have a look at the 970 or the 1060, the newer version basically. As value per price per performance, they do offer a bit better, but overall, if this is what you can afford, it's still a very, very good card. Here we have Arc running on the 950 Xtreme Gaming. This is at P1080, but with, as you can clearly see in the visuals here, all the settings set to low. We're getting okay frame rates. We're seeing it dropping down to 30, and the highest I saw it rise up to is about 45, so it's not great. If you want better frame rates at P1080, this is on the low presetting. If we turn this anti-aliasing lower, I have a feeling we're going to see a bit better. Not terribly. Unfortunately, I think for Arc, this 950 is a little bit on the slow side, so we're going to have to try a P720 resolution, and yes, then we're seeing in the 50 frames per second, which is much better. But as you can see, the effects here really are not great. But the problem is, if we turn up our effects, it visually looks much better, but then we're sitting at about 8 frames per second, which is frankly horrible. So if we try it at 720 on medium, perhaps. Just getting 15 frames per second. Just confirm it did apply. Shoo. Yeah, no, you really do want at least something like a 970 to be playing this game, as it seems like anything above low settings is a problem for the 950. And as you can see from our other reviews of the 950 in general, this 950 does quite well. But yes, P720 and low settings seems to be what you need to do to get Arc to work properly. I think one of the major reasons for this is our drawing distances are insane in this game, and as you can see from the leaves, all the leaves are constantly moving, which causes quite a bit of graphics rendering. But overall, I'd say playable if you really want to, but not something I would recommend. I would really say something like a 970 is the minimum to look at. If you want to run it at epic settings, something like a 1070 or a 980 Ti is needed for at HD resolution. If you want to run higher resolution, you need one serious setup.